Imagine you're an elite soldier, right? Stationed in this hyper-advanced, star-spanning fortress.
Oh, the absolute apex of thousands of years of tech evolution.
Exactly. You're equipped with reactive plasma shields that vaporize incoming fire. You've got algorithmic targeting computers like surgically wired right into your optic
Our
nerve.
whole 9 yards.
Yeah, orbital artillery platforms hovering above, ready to rain down localized sunfire the second you give the command.
Right.
And the enemy that is currently tearing your fortress apart, just piece by bloody piece, they don't even know how to forge a steel sword.
They're using rocks.
Literally.
Yeah.
Actual rocks, sharpened bones, their own jagged teeth. And they are winning. Welcome to today's deep dive.
It really is. I mean, it's the ultimate nightmare scenario for any technologically dependent civilization.
Oh, 100%.
Because when we look at the tactical landscape of the Warhammer 40K universe, we just naturally assume an arms race is, a linear equation.
Like whoever has the biggest gun wins.
Right. We assume the faction with the most complex microchips and the most efficient fusion reactors just automatically sits at the top of the food chain. But the Snakebite clan completely just utterly upends that conventional wisdom.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this central paradox is exactly what we're digging into today,
Right.
based on some just phenomenal source material that you, our listeners, sent in. We're looking at a chilling excerpt titled Snakebites, Primal Fury, and the Orcish Old Ways.
That's such a great text.
It really is. So we're exploring this faction of the orc race that looks at the sprawling mechanical marvels of a futuristic galaxy and completely rejects them.
Yeah, they want nothing to do with it.
In a setting filled with spacefaring battleships and plasma cannons, their most devastating weapons are untamed creatures and ancient rituals, which is just wild to wrap my head around.
And we really have to abandon our own biases immediately here, because the instinct is to look at the Snakebites as ignorant savages.
Yeah, like the unfortunate outcasts who just haven't figured out how a combustion engine works yet.
Exactly, but that is the fatal trap that most of their enemies fall into. They are not technologically deficient because of ignorance.
Right.
They lack modern machinery because of an unyielding puritanical philosophy. I mean, they are the grim, traditionalist heart of the orc species, and they actively weaponize their own primitive belief system.
So I'm going to push back on that a little bit, or at least, test that premise, because we know from the source that they largely originate from feral worlds, right?
Right, planets that have been completely cut off.
Yeah, reduced to primordial jungles and lethal deserts. So, if I'm stranded on a desert island and I build a spear out of bamboo, I'm not making some puritanical philosophical choice against firearms.
Sure, you're just trying to survive.
Exactly. I'm just making do with what I have. So I guess my question is, are they just the losers of the orc social hierarchy, making a virtue out of necessity? Or is this, like, a highly conscious, deliberate choice?
Oh, it is a highly conscious, violently enforced doctrine. And to understand just how deliberate it is, we really have to look at how orcish biology actually works. Okay.
Because, as you know, the orc species operates on genetic memory. They don't have, universities or engineering schools.
They just know things.
Yes.
Yeah.
They have specialized knowledge literally hard-coded into their fungal DNA. So an orc mech boy, their version of an engineer, he doesn't learn how to build things. He is born instinctively knowing how to intuitively wire a force field or build a combustion engine out of scrap metal. That instinct is just pulsing in the genetic code of their entire species.
Right, so it's an innate biological imperative for them to build machines. It's like a beaver building a dam.
That is the perfect analogy, which means these snake bites are actively, consciously suppressing their own species' genetic programming.
Wait, really? They're fighting their own DNA?
Yeah. They look at a mech boy, a creature whose very DNA is screaming at him to build a gun, and they brand him a heretic.
They believe that building a machine is polluting the purity of the orcish soul. So this isn't, a circumstantial lack of resources. This is a species fighting its own biological inclination toward technology because they view it as a profound moral failing.
A moral failing. That completely reframes the entire battlefield.
It does.
Because if I build a tank, my motivation is efficiency and protection, right?
Yeah.
I want to win the battle while minimizing the risk to myself.
Exactly, self-preservation.
But the snakebites look at that tank, and they don't see an armored threat. They see cowardice. They see spiritual decay.
What's fascinating here is how they define strength based on the text. They venerate the old gods, Gork and Mork, in their absolute most primal forms, and their big mantra is the old ways are the best ways.
Catchy.
Very. And to a snakebite, relying on a machine means you are delegating your survival to a piece of metal.
You're insulating yourself.
Right. You're insulating yourself from the visceral, bloody reality of combat. If you shoot an enemy from a mile away with a laser scope, well, you haven't actually tested your strength against theirs, have you?
You haven't proven your superiority to the universe. You've just, like, pulled a lever.
Exactly. In their eyes, the machine is a crutch for the weak.
Which introduces just this insane level of psychological horror for anyone fighting them. I mean, it's hard to overstate. Imagine being that Imperial soldier in the bunker we talked about in the intro.
Terrifying.
You expect your enemy to play by the unspoken mathematical rules of engagement, right? You expect them to respect your artillery, to seek cover, to retreat when they are mathematically outgunned.
Because that's what a rational army would do.
But you are facing an enemy that views your advanced civilization as an affront to existence itself. You're fighting a force of nature that genuinely pities you for needing a gun in the first place.
Yeah, they think you're pathetic.
And they believe that tearing you limb from limb with their bare hands is like a holy act of veneration to their gods.
It strips away all the comforting rules of warfare. Because civilization relies on mutual understanding, even in conflict.
Right, there's a shared logic.
But you cannot intimidate an enemy that looks at a synchronized orbital bombardment and sees it merely as a new, interesting environmental hazard to go out and hunt.
That's insane.
They have completely inoculated themselves against the shock and awe of modern warfare.
Okay, so they have the philosophical high ground in their own minds. They've suppressed their engineering instincts. They've rejected the combustion engine.
Right.
But practically speaking, this creates a massive logistical vacuum. I mean, you cannot conquer star systems just by running at them really fast with a bone club.
No, you definitely can't.
A galactic empire requires infrastructure.
Yeah.
It requires heavy armor, supply lines, siege capabilities. If they absolutely refuse to build machines, how on earth do they fill that logistical void? Because biology alone doesn't usually scale to interstellar war.
You would think so, but this is where the sheer, terrifying adaptability of the orkoid fungal ecosystem comes into play. They don't fill the void with machines, they fill it with the squig.
The squig.
Yes, the snake bites have elevated the squig, which is this ubiquitous, highly aggressive fungal beast, into the absolute foundation of their economy and their military-industrial complex.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because we're not just talking about riding a giant horse into battle, right?
No, not at all.
They have genetically bred different strains of this monstrous organism to fulfill every single tactical role that a mechanized army would use a vehicle for.
Exactly. You need rapid reconnaissance. You breed a long-legged, hyper-fast squig.
You need an armored personnel carrier.
Yeah.
You just hook a massive wagon up to a team of heavily muscled draft squigs. They've essentially replaced traditional tank factories and supply chains with a highly aggressive, carnivorous petting zoo.
A very deadly petting zoo, yeah. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, think about the logistical elegance of this approach.
Elegance. Okay, I'm listening.
Well, an Imperial super heavy battle tank is an incredible piece of machinery, right? But it is an absolute nightmare to maintain in the field.
Oh, for sure. The logistics must be a nightmare.
You need specialized tech priests to bless the engine. You need highly refined Prometheum fuel. You need spare treads machine to exact specifications. And most importantly, you need a massive, vulnerable supply line to deliver all of it.
Right. And if an enemy cuts your supply line, your multi-billion credit tank is basically nothing but a really expensive metal coffin.
Exactly. But the snakebite equivalent, the squigoth, doesn't have supply lines.
And we need to spend a moment on the squigoth, because to really understand the snakebites, you have to understand the sheer scale of this specific creature.
It's massive.
We're talking about a reptilian beast the size of an office building. It is quite literally a living siege engine. Its hide is so dense that anti-tank rockets just detonate uselessly against its scales.
It shrugs them off.
And it doesn't need fuel trucks. It doesn't need spare parts.
No, its fuel line is the enemy infantry it just crushed underfoot. It repairs its own armor through rapid biological regeneration. It doesn't throw a track in rough terrain. It just steps over the rubble. It is a completely self-sustaining engine of destruction that actively thrives in the chaos of battle.
That's terrifying.
And because the snakebites utilize these beasts, they achieve an incredibly high degree of mobility. The source text mentions this specifically. They routinely outflank heavily mechanized, quote-unquote, advanced armies that get bogged down, waiting for fuel trucks to cross muddy terrain.
So the technologically superior force is outmaneuvered by feral warriors riding literal bipedal mouths.
Basically, yeah.
But the control mechanism is what I find really baffling here. Like, if I'm driving that Imperial tank, I have a steering yoke, pedals, a comms array to coordinate with my squadron.
Right, you have control.
If I'm a snakebite warlord sitting on top of a raging, building-sized reptile that instinctively wants to consume everything in its path, how do I get it to attack the heavily fortified bunker and not my own front lines? I mean, a creature that size doesn't care about a bit and a bridle.
No, it doesn't, and this is where the lore points to something far deeper than just animal husbandry. The text describes a mystical bond between the snakebite and the beast.
A mystical bond.
Yeah, this isn't a trainer with a whip trying to break a wild animal. Because both the orcs and the squigs share the exact same underlying fungal biology, they operate on a shared innate wavelength.
Oh, interesting.
It's a symbiotic relationship.
So they're essentially tapping into a shared biological network.
Precisely. The squig inherently understands the aggression and the intent of its snakebite master. It bypasses the need for reins or steering columns or complex communication arrays.
That's wild.
When a snakebite desires a charge, it is a shared impulse. The beast feels the warlord's bloodlust as its own. It is the triumph of raw, integrated biology over refined physics and mechanical control.
Let's just, visualize that sensory experience for a moment for the listener. Put yourself on the front line. The fog of war is rolling in. You expect to hear the whine of turbine engines, the clatter of tank treads, the static of intercepted radio chatter.
The sounds of modern war.
Right. But instead, you feel this rhythmic, localized earthquake. You look over the horizon, and you don't see the sleek, geometric lines of an armored division. You see a rolling tide of muscle, fangs, and leathery hides.
Shrugging off your modern weaponry.
Yeah. And atop these nightmares are warriors howling in perfect, terrifying unison with the monsters they ride, connected by a biological imperative you cannot jam, you cannot hack, and you cannot disrupt.
It really forces you to fundamentally reconsider the definition of the word advanced.
Yep, really does.
Is a civilization that requires a million fragile moving parts and delicate supply chains truly more advanced than a society that organically grows its weapons from the dirt and controls them through a flawless, unbreakable, biological synchronicity?
That is a brilliant way to frame it. But it brings me to my next massive point of skepticism.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because I can accept that a giant biological monster can crush a tank. Sure. But a tank is just ground armor. We're talking about a universe with void shields, orbital lasers, god machines that can level cities from miles away.
The heavy hitters.
Right. Muscle and teeth, no matter how big they are, cannot crack a void shield. If they have entirely rejected plasma generators and atomic warheads, how do they project the sheer, reality-breaking destructive power needed to survive the 41st millennium?
This is where we transition from the purely biological into the realm of the metaphysical.
Okay.
To counter those weapons of mass destruction, the snakebites rely on the spiritual core of their clan, the Weird Boys. We are moving from biological warfare to psychic warfare.
Now wait, in the wider orc lore, Weird Boys, which are orc psychers, for those unaware, they're generally viewed by other clans as dangerous liabilities, right?
Usually, yes. They're seen as highly unstable.
Like they're unpredictable time bombs of psychic energy that are just as likely to accidentally explode their own friends as they are the enemy.
Right. Most orcs keep a wide berth.
But the snakebites treat them completely differently, don't they? They don't just tolerate them, they elevate them. They call them witch doctors and revere them as the holy vessels of their gods.
Which raises a really important question. Why does the most primitive anti-technology clan revere the very individuals who wield the most volatile, incomprehensible power in their entire species?
Right. It seems contradictory.
It all comes down to the mechanics of the WAG.
The WAG.
Yes. The WAG is a psychic gestalt field generated by the collective emotion, aggression, and sheer willpower of the orc race. It is a localized reality distortion aura.
Okay.
In other clans, this energy is just a byproduct of their warfare. But the snakebites view this energy as a living, sacred force. And they believe this living force is at its absolute strongest when it is pure and untamed.
I want to focus on that word, untamed. Because I think this is the linchpin that connects their anti-technology philosophy directly to their terrifying power.
Absolutely.
Think of it like a biological alternator in a car engine. The faster and harder the engine runs, the more raw electricity the alternator generates.
That is an incredibly apt metaphor. I love that.
So if an orc from another clan is sitting in a comfortable air-conditioned cockpit, pressing buttons to fire a laser from a mile away, their personal risk is low, right?
Right, they're safe.
Their emotional state is filtered, mitigated by the machine. The engine is basically idling. So the psychic voltage they're contributing to the way GH Carrico is minimal.
Yes, but look at the snakebite. He is covered in mud, he's bleeding, screaming at the top of his lungs, wrestling a predatory beast, and charging face first into melee combat with nothing but a sharpened bone.
Pure adrenaline.
His emotional state is entirely unrestrained. His survival instinct, his bloodlust, his adrenaline, it is all spiking at maximum capacity. He is running the engine in the red.
So by living this incredibly brutal, feral lifestyle, the entire clan acts as this supercharged psychic battery.
Exactly.
The rejection of tech isn't just a quaint cultural tradition. It's a tactical necessity to maximize the voltage of their psychic grid. They are flooding their witch doctors with exponentially more raw power than any other clan could ever dream of.
And the witch doctors act as the grounding rods for this localized hurricane of psychic energy. We're talking about warheads, the most powerful among them, who absorb the feral roaring of 10,000 squig riders at once.
Wow.
So while a technologically advanced army is spending 10 minutes calculating atmospheric pressure and orbital trajectories to call in an artillery strike, a snakebite warhead simply points his bone staff and vomits a localized tsunami of psychic green fire that literally melts reality itself.
It makes the highly advanced armies seem almost fragile in comparison.
It really does.
It's like they're hiding behind these intricate, delicate panes of glass, desperately trying to calculate the structural integrity, while the snake bites are just out there throwing metaphysical boulders through the window. It defies every scientific countermeasure.
Because it operates outside the bounds of science. You can deploy electromagnetic countermeasures to jam a radio frequency, sure. You can introduce a logic virus to hack an enemy's targeting cogitator. But you cannot hack the collective psychic manifestation of a million primal warriors channeling the unfiltered rage of their gods.
I can't put a firewall up against that.
No. The witch doctor isn't casting a spell in the traditional sense. He is acting as a conduit for the sheer collective willpower of his entire clan.
Which forces us to look inward at the individual snakebite orc. Because you cannot act as a battery for that level of primal psychic violence without it fundamentally shaping every fiber of your society and your psychology.
Oh, it defines them completely.
Right. You don't just clock out of the way GH at 5 p.m. and go home to watch TV. This brings us to their culture and how this philosophy forges the daily life of the savage orc.
The structure of their society is entirely alien to any civilized norm. There is no civilian class.
None.
None. There is no diplomacy, no concept of non-combatants, no leisure. Every single member of this clan is an apex predator. The source material uses a really brilliant psychological term to describe them here.
Oh, what is it?
It calls them the living embodiment of the orcish id.
The id. Okay, let's dig deeply into the implications of that.
Well, in classical Freudian psychoanalysis, the id represents the primitive and instinctual part of the mind.
Right, the deepest, darkest part.
Exactly. It contains sexual and aggressive drives and hidden memories. It operates entirely on the pleasure principle and the survival instinct, completely devoid of morality, empathy, or societal constraints. It is the unbridled, unfiltered voice that just says, I want, I take, I destroy, I survive.
And in human history, or really any functioning civilization in the galaxy, the entire purpose of society is to suppress the id. Right?
Exactly.
We create the ego and the superego. We invent laws, we establish manners, we build technology, we create complex justice systems. All of it is designed to keep the id locked in a cage. We distance ourselves as far as possible from the brute reality of the biological food chain.
But the snakebites have done the exact opposite. They looked at the id, at that raw, unfiltered, terrifying violence, and instead of locking it in a cage, they built a highly functional, galaxy-threatening society entirely out of it.
Wow.
They do not suppress the beast, they revere it.
The text mentions their right of the hunt as a prime example of this. It describes their society as a brutal meritocracy, where only the absolute strongest survive.
It's ruthless.
And I want you, the listener, to really internalize what this means on a societal level. Think about how advancement works in our world. You want to prove your worth, you get an education, you pass a performance review, you build a
Right,
resume.
you climb the corporate ladder.
Yeah, but imagine your workplace's corporate ladder, but instead of a performance review to get a promotion, your rite of passage. The minimum requirement to simply be acknowledged as an adult member of the clan is walking out into a lethal wilderness, completely unarmed, tracking down a monstrous, venomous reptilian predator and killing it with your bare hands.
Just another Tuesday for a snakebite.
Right, if you win, you wear its skin and return a warrior. If you lose, you are digested.
It is Darwinism weaponized on a societal scale. This brutal meritocracy ensures an absolute, terrifying purity of physical and psychological strength within their ranks.
It's the ultimate filter.
Think about the filtering process this creates. By the time a snakebite orc actually marches onto a battlefield to face an enemy army, they have already survived daily trials that would completely wipe out the elite special forces of other, more advanced factions.
They don't even need boot camp.
They don't need basic training at all because their entire childhood is a meat grinder. Weakness, hesitation, reliance on others, fear, these traits are entirely culled from their genetic and cultural pool long before they ever see a space marine or a laser rifle.
And that extreme Darwinism directly feeds into their aesthetic too, which is a massive component of their psychological warfare.
Oh, absolutely. The aesthetic is terrifying.
Imagine the opposing gun line. You are an Imperial Guardsman. You are in your mass-produced, freshly pressed uniform, holding a standardized laser rifle. The fog parts, and the enemy steps forward. You are facing giant, hulking warriors covered in ritualistic tribal tattoos.
Dripping with mud and blood.
Yeah. They aren't wearing Kevlar. They're wearing armor crafted from the thick hides of the monsters they strangled. They're adorned with bones, and they're literally wearing the skulls of the commanding officers they killed in the last campaign as trophies.
The psychological battle is won before a single shot is even fired. You are staring at the physical manifestation of the food chain coming to reclaim you.
That's a chilling way to put it.
When an enemy looks at a snakebite, they don't see a soldier. They see the primeval terror of the dark, the thing that humanity built walls and fires to hide from in our own prehistory. The snakebites drag advanced civilizations kicking and screaming back into the Stone Age psychologically before the physical violence even starts.
So we have all these incredible pieces on the board right now. The deliberate philosophical rejection of technology, the suppression of genetic engineering instincts.
The squig economy.
Right, creation of a vast biological military-industrial complex centered around the squig. The utilization of feral living to supercharge the psychic WAGH energy. And a culture built entirely upon the unfiltered, weaponized id.
It's a potent mix.
It really is. And we have to bring all of this together to answer the ultimate question posed by this deep dive. Why does this specific combination make this primitive clan the ultimate horror of the 41st millennium?
Well, it culminates in a profound and, frankly, deeply unsettling realization about the nature of reality in this universe.
Okay, lay it on us.
The source material states that the snakebites are a grim reminder that the most terrifying weapon is not a gun, but a belief so powerful it can shatter the foundations of reality.
So what does this all mean? A belief so powerful it can shatter the foundations of reality. Because in our world, belief is a motivator.
Sure, it drives action.
It causes wars, it builds empires, it inspires people to do terrible or incredible things. But it is still just an idea. Here, we're talking about something literal. How does a simple, primitive belief system elevate from, like, a quaint tribal custom to a reality-shattering threat?
This is where the true terror of the Gestalt field comes to a head. The snakebites aren't dangerous despite their lack of technology. They are dangerous because of it.
Okay, unpack that for me.
In the 41st millennium, the psychic energy of the orc WAGH doesn't just sit in the mind, it interacts directly with real space. It is a documented phenomenon that if enough orcs believe something is true with absolute, unwavering conviction, the localized reality around them begins to alter to accommodate that belief.
So their puritanical philosophy literally changes the rules of engagement.
Precisely. Think about the civilizations they are fighting. The Imperium of Man, the Tau Empire, they rely on rules. They rely on the rigid laws of physics, the predictability of mechanical engineering, the established mathematical doctrines of war.
Like a plasma coil generates a specific heat. Kinetic armor deflects a specific amount of force. It is all math.
Exactly. It's all math. But the snakebites introduce what the text calls glorious primal chaos. Modern mathematical systems simply cannot process or defend against an enemy that doesn't obey the math.
Because the math dictates that a feral alien with a club carved from a thigh bone shouldn't be able to destroy a heavily armored battle tank.
Right. The kinetic energy required simply isn't there.
But the Snakebite believes he can.
Yes.
And because his belief is absolute, completely unpolluted by any reliance on machines, and fueled by this untamed, surging psychic energy generated by his feral lifestyle, he swings the club.
And reality bends.
The way our energy surges through the impact, and the tank's armor catastrophically buckles under a force that shouldn't mathematically exist. Reality bends to accommodate the beast.
That is the ultimate horror. It is the terrifying realization by the advanced spacefaring civilizations that all their progress, all their centuries of research, their quantum cogitators, their laser grids and void shields, are ultimately fragile, delicate illusions in the face of absolute, unyielding, biologically ingrained belief.
Wow.
The snakebites represent a terrifying vision of a society that has entirely rejected civilization for the power of the beast. They will not rest until the galaxy is stripped of its pretensions and return to that state of glorious feral chaos.
It is a profoundly humbling and honestly terrifying thought.
Yeah.
Let's briefly recap the journey we've taken today, because we have covered a massive amount of conceptual ground.
We really have.
We started by exploring a deliberate philosophical rejection of modern technology, realizing that the snakebites view machines as a moral failing, a crutch that pollutes the soul.
We then examine how they filled that void by weaponizing the biological world, right? They turned the highly adaptable fungal squig ecosystem into everything from rapid attack cavalry to building-sized, self-sustaining, living siege engines that don't rely on vulnerable supply lines.
And we dove into the mechanics of the why, understanding how their brutally feral, unrestrained lifestyle acts as a biological alternator, generating massive, surging amounts of raw psychic energy that their revered witch doctors channel into reality melting power.
And we looked at the individual orc, the living embodiment of the id. A society forged in a brutal meritocracy where the right of the hunt calls all weakness, producing a species perfectly designed to endure, conquer, and instill primeval terror.
Which brings me to a final lingering thought. I want to leave you, the listener, with something to really mull over, building directly on the mechanics of the reality-bending belief we just uncovered.
Oh, this should be good.
We know from the text that the snakebites possess a belief so powerful it can shatter the foundations of reality. And we know that their core, fundamental belief, the very pillar of their entire society, is that technology is a crutch.
Right.
They believe with every fiber of their fungal DNA that machines make an enemy weak, that technology is inherently flawed and inferior to biological strength.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
So here is the question for you to explore. If their collective primal belief literally alters reality to make their bone clubs hit harder, is it possible that by simply believing technology is inherently flawed, they are actually psychically forcing the high-tech weapons of their enemies to jam, misfire, and fail against them?
The implications of that are staggering. It means they aren't just surviving in an advanced galaxy through sheer toughness.
Right. Maybe their pure primal belief is actively, psychically dismantling the technology of the universe around them. Maybe the reason the plasma gun overheats and explodes in the guardsman's hands isn't because of a mechanical failure.
It's because the snakebite charging at him believes so fiercely that plasma guns are useless garbage that the gestalt field reaches out and physically breaks the weapon.
Exactly. Their very presence on a battlefield might be a localized EMP of sheer, willful belief.
It completely reframes every engagement. They aren't just fighting the army. Their consciousness is actively hostile to the very concept of machinery.
Exactly. They are fighting the concept of progress itself and winning. So the next time you think about progress as a straight line, from the wooden club to the laser cannon, remember the snakebites. Remember that in a universe governed by chaos, sometimes if you just believe hard enough, the club shatters the laser into 1,000 pieces.
It's a great thought to end on.
I want to thank you, our listener, for providing such incredibly deep, thought-provoking source material today, and for joining us on this deep dive into the orcish old ways. Keep questioning the linear path, keep your survival instincts sharp, and as always, stay curious.